sounds fine. If you can hear me clearly. Thank you very much. So today we are going to speak quickly about two regimes here in Portugal. The special tax regime and the golden visa regime. First of all, Caiado Correia is one of the best and one of the biggest law firms in Portugal. We are ranked at the top 10 of the law firms here in Portugal. How you can see here, there's where the ranking of our law firm is. It's general information about Caiado Correia. After this webinar, I can send by email all this information that you are seeing in this PowerPoint, and any kind of questions, I will let you know my email, and you can make further questions because we are going to speak in general terms about these two questions related to the golden visa and to the special tax regime. Your general information where you can find us. We have 3 offices in Portugal, Oporto in the north, Lisbon headquarters here in the center of Portugal, in the south in Faro. And then we have different branches all over the world and all the Portuguese speaking countries like Brazil, Angola, China, and different other countries that we have lawyers of ours too, or where we have agreements with them. We have several awards and recognitions you can see. So, first of all, let's start with the non-habitual tax residency regime. This is a special tax regime that is created and be used for 10 years. In general terms, the advantage of the Portuguese regime is that you can use for 10 years this regime, and in general terms, we will be exempt from all your income coming out of Portugal. So, here in Portugal, we have in the tax law, we have a principle that is worldwide income, so you have to declare it here in Portugal. But with this regime, you can be exempt. Of course, we have to analyze specifically where the income comes from, which country that we are speaking about, and the treaties that we have between Portugal and that country to avoid double taxation. But in general terms, this regime permits that all income coming from outside of Portugal can be exempt for 10 years. The requirements are very simple to obtain this non-habitual residence regime in Portugal. The first one is not have to have been taxed the last 5 years here in Portugal. So if you never lived in Portugal and you never paid, and at least the last 5 years you didn't pay any kind of taxes in Portugal, you can apply for it. If you comply with the second requirement, that is having a Portuguese address here. So 2 main requirements to apply for this Portuguese special tax regime. Not having been qualified as tax resident in Portugal for the past 5 years. And the second one is related to having a Portuguese address. It can be a rent or it can be a purchase and sale agreement related to a property here that you can show as you have an address in Portugal. You have to fulfill these 2 requirements here in Portugal. How you can see in the PowerPoint, the general terms that we are speaking about, you can find it here. Generally without any tax, 0% tax on dividends, interests, royalties, capital gains, immovable property, as well as foreign source real estate rents and pensions. Here we are speaking about all the income that come from abroad of Portugal. Then you can see the different rates. In the PowerPoint, I will send this information too, and if you have several questions, because keep in mind that exists different treaties to avoid double taxation between Portugal and several countries that are blacklisted too. So be aware that we are not speaking about that this regime will apply to every country in the world. Of course, general terms it will apply, but we have to see and to confirm specific questions related to specific countries too. Here you can see the taxation for non-habitual tax residents. How I was speaking, dividends 0%, interest, royalties, private pensions, public pensions. Be aware of 28% of tax and capital gains. Here is a specific one that is not exempt. Capital gains from real estate. This kind of capital gains will be for sure exempt. Also rental income. And here we have a specific terms who have unit links or SICAF, in Luxembourg, for example, or different kind of structures that exist. You still have here some taxation, principal and capital gains or other capital income. If we are speaking about interests or dividends, it will be exempt during the last 10 years. Just notice here, imagine if you apply for this special tax regime in Portugal, imagine the second year that the regime is granted to you and you want to leave Portugal. You can suspend this regime, go back to the country wherever the world you want to, and if you want to, imagine, past 2 more years, want to come back to Portugal, you can assume the tax regime for more 8 years because it was suspended and you just use the 2 years beneficial from this tax regime. So it don't need to be consecutive years. You can use it like that, but you can suspend and come back to Portugal and still use this regime in the time that you still have to. Here we have the Golden Visa program. Now we are speaking about residency in Portugal. Normally we call this Golden Visa program a gate to Europe, because here we are speaking mainly for people that don't have a European Union passport, that are from third-party countries, non-European citizens, don't have any kind of passport from a European country. Here exists different kinds of investment that can apply for the Golden Visa regime. It exists more than these 3 that you can see in the PowerPoint, but this is the main use, what is more common here in Portugal and with this regime. The transference of capital of around 1 million euros to a Portuguese bank account, creation of 10 jobs, then workstations here in Portugal, you incorporate a company and you create 10 jobs, or acquisition of property for an amount equal or greater than €500,000. Here are the main options that you have to apply the Golden Visa regime. This Golden Visa regime is a program that mainly used for 6 years. You have to maintain the investment during. Imagine if you choose to invest in a real estate, any kind of property. It can be commercial or housing. For 5 years, imagine you buy for €500,000 an apartment here in Portugal. It's not possible for you to sell it because if you sell the investment, in this case the property, you will lose this kind of visa here in Portugal. The first option that I was speaking about is the transference of €1 million to a Portuguese bank account. You can deposit this in a Portuguese bank account. Of course, it has to be a bank that exists in Portugal, it's authorized or registered here in our country. Or you can make an acquisition of public debt instruments like Portuguese state, in particular due to security, savings certificates, treasury certificates. You can do this kind of investments too, and of course to here have some kind of rent coming from the 1 million deposits that you are making. Purchase of securities of private or public Portuguese companies is an option too here. Creating then 10 job stations here in Portugal. Of course, you have to have a Portuguese company or incorporate a company or buy a company already incorporated here in Portugal and then recruit 10 new employees, and of course you have to register them in the social security so we can prove that 10 workstations were created and then start the Golden Visa process. Here, normally, it's the main option that we are seeing actually in Portugal. We are speaking about acquisition of property in a value of €500,000. I was saying it can be any type of property. It can be commercial or it can be housing. So here you don't need to just purchase an apartment or a villa or anything like that. You can purchase a store, for example, and if it complies with a €500,000 investment requirement, you can apply with this kind of investment too. About the acquisition of buildings here in Portugal. In general terms, here in Portugal, it works like all over Europe. The law and the legal requirements are very similar. We do the due diligence of the documentation of the property and its owner, of course, just to confirm and check that everything is fine. We do a promissory agreement of purchase and sale if it's needed to do, and then we do the closing, salvation the public deed before a notary, and definitive registration of the acquisition before the Conservatório de Registro Predial. That's the name of the entity where we do the closing. About the acquisition of real estate in Portugal. Here, how I was speaking, of course, you have the right to property over Portugal in legal, protected by the Constitution of the Portuguese Republic. This is general terms. It's all over the world. Here in Portugal, a private property is legally protected by our Constitution. And in Portugal, there is no temporary limit to the right of ownership. So if you have the ownership of property, it will be yours. If you want to rent it, if you want to sell it, it's yours, and you don't have any kind of temporal limit related to the ownership. The acquisition pledge may be secured through an internal registration of the property documentation on behalf of the customer, which renders the property obstacle. So this is all kind of guarantees, general ones that are known and that are used all over Europe. After this kind of acquisition, we have the step 2. We need to open a Portuguese bank account and you know the documentation and give it to the immigration services that in Portugal is named CEF. I will send the steps 1, 2, 3. All of this information we will send by email if it's not clear enough. Of course, we have a signature of different documents, engagement letter, the power of attorney, so we can do on your behalf this kind of investment, tax representative documents, because if you are from a third-party country that are not from the European Union, you will need in Portugal a tax representation, and of course a promissory agreement that defines the payment terms and the conditions of the deal. This is general terms, the documentation that need to be signed. Last step, the submission of documents to the CEF. When all the documentation is ready and the proof of the investment is made, the bank account is open, everything that I was speaking that is referred in this PowerPoint and the last ones that I was showing, we have to submit all the documentation to the CEF service. Of course, this is not the final step, but the main goal, that is the golden visa, is approved. When everything is analyzed by the public services, the CEF services, the visa will be granted if it complies with all the requirements that we are speaking about. Why the Portuguese regime? This kind of regime exists in different countries around Europe. It's not an exclusive from the Portuguese or from Portugal or the Portuguese regime. If you can see here, this is numbers from the governmental website that you can see the total amount in the center of the PowerPoint that was invested in Portugal here related with this regime and the main nationalities that are applying at the moment for this kind of regime. You can find China in the first place, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, and Russia. As you can see, this is the main 5. Of course, we have investments all over the world, and you can see the number of clients that Ricardo Guerreiro already exist in this kind of process. We have 100% success when we apply, and we have all the documentation to apply to CEF services. So for us, it's general terms, our daily basis work here. Why Portugal? I don't need to say to you that Portugal is a safe country, nice weather. This is general terms that I think for you is already known. We are a European football champion. For me, that I like football, it's a nice point to refer. We win the Eurovision Song Contest, not the last one, but it was in Lisbon here. So we are an open society. You can speak several languages here in Portugal. It's easy. We don't have any kind of restriction related to zones that you can or cannot invest here, so you can buy a property in the north, in the center, in the south, or even in the Portuguese islands like Madeira or Açores. So this is my main question that I think is important about the culture, the history, the economy, our banks, everything that are important when you choose a country to invest your money to. So any question that you need and it will need to be clarified, I will send my email here. You can see in the box down on the right side. And for sure, I will send this email. I will send an email with this presentation, the video too that was here exposed. Be aware that it's just general terms that we are speaking here, and any question that you need, feel free to put it. We will be here to respond for your specific question or other questions that we have not spoken about in this part of presentation. So thank you very much for your attendance here. It was a pleasure. Any question, please just send me an email. Bye.